Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. This is Kenya Revolutionary for another session, ladies and gentlemen. Um, very quickly, I'll probably be here for an hour or less than an hour or thereabouts. So if you're going to catch me, if you get the notification, then karibu sana, karibu sana, karibu sana. So to get the formalities out of the way, karibuni sana. If this is your first time here, I talk about Kenyan politics and world politics as it relates to Kenya. Okay, so if you like that kind of content, karibu sana, go ahead and subscribe, share, like, comment, and do all the good stuff. If you've already subscribed and you've done all the good stuff, please, you know the first order of business is to do what? Like the video. Thank you very much in advance. Sawa, tuingie kwa mada. Today, I just wanted to touch on this topic here. The headline is this: understanding Kenya's problem and how to solve it. Now, you know, I think Kenyans, we spend a lot of time and money and energy discussing individuals, these politicians, so-called leaders, or whatever the case is, what they do, matamshi yao, what they say, how they interact with each other, how they throw jabs at each other. I'm talking about, you know, salvos and insults and everything in between, okay? And of course, we have their followers, minions, who, you know, amplify this by the help of the media. And it kind of sorts of becomes a circus. It's political drama that we entertain so much. And we often forget, diagnose what needs to be done and what's the problem. Most importantly, what's the problem? Because you have to understand the problem before you deal with it, okay? And the majority of the people, they have a good understanding of what's really stalling the progression of the nation as far as economically. Because the number one problem, let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades, and this is not limited only to Kenya, but it's to Africa, majority of African nations. The economy seems to be the problem, okay? Karibu sana na kuona Principal Kaur, na kuona Ani. Karibu sana. I'm glad to see you guys. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Mnajua the first order of business ni kufanya nini? Ni kulike hiyo ninio. Ama namna gani? Okay, go ahead and do that. I'll give you a few seconds as people grab their seats. Watu ambao wanaingia saizi, tafadhalini, kaeni chini tuongee. Now, I want to focus on really what needs to be done. Actually, before even we get to the what needs to be done, I want to address what really ails us as a country. Now, if you look at Kenya, we have this whatever size of nice piece of land with wonderful indigenous people who live on it. And the majority of people who live in it live under the poverty level, okay? We do not have a working healthcare system. We do not have the infrastructural development that's needed for us to trade not only within the country and with other countries, okay? We are limited. Our leaders seems to be, devoid of any ideas of how to develop this nation. Not necessarily, but they actually used our tax money to enrich themselves rather than develop the country, okay? And the nature of how we conduct our politics, as we discussed yesterday with Brother Benson when he came in, we can both agree, and with you guys, that these folks that we delegated this power to represent us, to work on our behalf, work for us, to implement this constitution so that we can have a system that works. These people do not want to do that. They are actually pledging their allegiance to these parochial political, ethno-political parties that are basically briefcase, money laundering machines, personal businesses, individuals who we call tribal chieftains, okay? And these tribal chieftains create coalitions, okay, where they loot and they basically have monopoly of power. They get to decide what happens. They are above the law. The judiciary does not. The justice system cannot touch them. They can commit any crime and get away with it. They do businesses. They cut deals, with foreigners, they forced our lawmakers to approve budgets that we have no say in it. There's no auditing taking place, corruption, extrajudicial killings, all this nonsense. Where does it start? We have to understand before we actually go to the system that is holding us back, before we go to that, these individuals and their coalition thereof that operate within this corrupt system that does not want to govern within the frameworks of our constitution. They think they're above the law. They're our lords. They're lording over us. Their words is law. The laws does not apply to them. But where does this start? Because in order to have a thriving economy, in order to have a thriving nation, you have to have a healthy economy that works for everyone. You have to have a judicial system, laws that are not discriminatory. They protect and serve everybody. There's no law enforcement in Kenya. We have thugs wearing uniform calling themselves the police force. Where did it all start? Now, this is a discussion that I had with somebody a few times back. And I was just telling them, look at what's the difference between Burkina Faso. I know Burkina Faso is the new template, or the new example, the poster boy for how Africa should move on. Granted that, we might not like the idea of, a military coup d'etat, military rule, okay, or a benevolent dictator like we had with Muammar Gaddafi. But again, if we are to compare, would I rather live under Gaddafi or under Ruto? Of course, I would like to live under Gaddafi. Gaddafi promoted a lot of, education. They were living in surplus. There was free healthcare. There was infrastructure. I mean, there was all that. But looking at Ibrahim Traore, there's two things I want you to look at, especially with Kenya. I know a lot of people usually like the Singaporean example. Oh, let's look at Singapore and all this, and also, which is fine. It's okay. It's okay to compare Singapore and Kenya. Okay. Of course, they give an example in 1970s. We had more money than Singapore. Now Singapore is, basically way, okay. Of course, there are things that that Singaporean, I think it was prime minister or president, whatever the case is, there are measures that he took that actually drove Singapore to where it's at economically. Even China, which is China now is a world leader, okay, it's a superpower, okay. They're on par with the US and Russia and the big dogs. What really drove them up there? Look at their policies. Let me just mention two main things that actually made these countries move up the economic ladder and become superpowers, an economic regional heavyweight. These are the two things, okay? They had a sound economic system and they had a sound military system. What do I mean? They could protect themselves from foreigners, and also within the country, they had laws that they made sure they followed through, implemented, activated, participated, enforced when somebody violated the rights of the individual people. For example, in Singapore, what made them actually move up the social economic ladder, the people that is, the millions, the president came up with the new laws, okay, through the parliament, of course, that if you were to steal from public, you are going to be executed. The same rules applied in China. That's why they move so new. They build all this infrastructure and all this stuff and their military, whatever, because if you steal from the public, they execute you. Not like Kenya, when you steal, you run for president or you run for MP, a public office. Okay? So my main point is two things. You have to be able to protect yourself from enemies within the nation and outside the nation. protection against people who want to corrupt the system, steal from the system, violate the people's human rights within the country and outside the country. Okay? In order, you have to do that. You have to be able to defend yourself from enemies within and enemies outside of the country. That is number one. And your economic policies have to be sound, where it's people-centered. Okay? Those are the two ingredients that you need in order to move majority of the population up the social economic ladder. Now, I want to play a video. It's going to be lengthy because today I have time today. I have time. I don't know about you. If you don't have time, that's fine. You can watch this on your at your own time, okay? But I want you to listen to Dr. Henry Clark. Okay? He's one of in my view, one of the greatest African scholars of his time. Okay, he was actually an advisor of Kwame Nkrumah. He wrote speech, most of Malcolm X's speech in 1960s. So he lived in Ghana for a while and other African nations. He has books, numerous books on Diop and other African scholars. Okay, so this guy knows what he's talking about. Yes, they got a time, but maybe not so much. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say in not so many words is this. Okay, in order for you to thrive, especially let's use Kenya, the Kenyan context, okay? In order for us to get ourselves out of this rot, we have to do a couple of things. Rid ourselves from these leeches that have been bringing down and have been working within the system, have been beneficiaries of this system. And number two, we have to be able to defend ourselves from outside power, because Kenya is greatly influenced by powers outside it. The Great Britain, US, and the others, okay? Now, let's play this, Ninio. Let me play this so you can understand what I'm saying. Let's get to this, and I will expound on this because I want you to get that understanding before we get to these characters, Wakina Ruto, Wantam, Gachagua, Raila, Uhuru, and all this nonsense, okay? We'll get there. Because these guys, they, again, like I said, you have to ask yourself this question. What is the problem with Kenya? The number one problem, the number one issue is the economy. But why are we not thriving economically? It is because, of course, of these individuals that we entrusted to implement the constitution that will create an environment. If implemented right, it was intended, it will create an environment where we can thrive economically. But these people have stalled. They do not want to represent us. They're working at their own interest, not in the interest of the Kenyan people. So how are these people surviving within this corrupt system? They've refused to respect the constitution. They refused. They're dishing out money, having parties at the State House like today they are doing. So how are they surviving? What seems to be the problem? Let's get and diagnose the problem first. Let me get with the first video. Like the video and subscribe, share, like and comment before we go on. Let me go to the mada. Tuende kwa mada mwanzo. I think further to the video, sorry. Listen keenly so we can learn something, okay? All right, Asante, let's go. Here's Henry Clark talking about Mandela, but it has Africa.
Every person that came into Africa did Africa a disservice. Earlier today, I was accused of Arab bashing in an interview over WNYC. I was saying that the Arab slave trade started 1,000 years before the European slave trade. Yeah. And that it drained Africa of so much time and energy and organization, the Africa did not have the organization and the energy to successfully resist the European slave trade. Going to have to prove ourselves equal to the nature of change And to prove yourself equal to the nature of change, you have to prove yourself equal to the nature of revolution. And realize revolution is not always killing people. Revolution is making a dramatic change in your own life and the life around you. Doing for yourself what you've been expecting other people to do for you. You cannot start by hoping to have a great mass around you. You can take the teachings of Marcus Garvey, especially his African fundamentals. You can look at the document compiled by
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
The number one food for regular beef.
Sorry about that.
Professor Hill. You can look at the work compiled by Professor Martin, Tony Martin, and other scholars who found different approaches to Marcus Garvey. You can make up your mind that you're going to have to stop being those small, selfish people worrying about petty sororities and fraternities and a whole lot of things, wasting your time. You're going to have to learn that everything that touches your life must contribute to your liberation or be thrown into the ash can of history. The ANC, Nelson Mandela, is a delicate thing because I am a great admirer of the man, and I think he's the finest African to emerge since Kwame Nkrumah. Now, when I say this and say that I have some honest differences of opinion, you have to understand this honest difference of opinion is based on the fact that I have been related to African revolutionary ideas most of my life. And I think that some publicity, some admission should have been made about the work of the PAC, Pan-Africanist Congress. Some words should have been said about the movement of Stephen Biko, African consciousness, the unity movement led by Mr. Tapata. Some words should have been said about the role of women in the South African struggle, and there are 2 new good books on the subject. And that ANC becomes as acceptable to white people as the NACP. And inasmuch as integration has already failed, we need to say that, to acknowledge the fact that Nelson Mandela, a great strategist, might have been saying some things for strategy that he might have to change later on. Some things that are unreal. When he said a multiracial society, I don't know of any multiracial society in history. That one people had to be in charge. I don't know of a non-racist society in all human history. And I don't know of any society in history where the Europeans shared power with the non-Europeans. If I catch a thief in my home and I've got a 6th room, I'm not going to negotiate with the thief, say you stay in the back room or the front room, so long as you behave yourself. I'm going to negotiate with the undertaker to take the thief away. Now, I don't think Nelson Mandela can afford to say things like this, but maybe I can say them because I've got nothing to lose but my obscurity. But we need to be honest with ourselves, because nations are coming into being in Africa that are fake. Namibia is not free. Whites bought up all the real estate, took all the money out of the country, and give the African a limousine and say, now you're free. You got limousine on the fry. They're deep in debt. People don't send armies anymore, they send money. They take all of your money and they send part of it back as a loan. Then they send one of them to manage the money and manage you in debt to the point that you got to obey them when they tell you what to do. Money is the new form of imperialism. We need to look at Southern Africa. We need to look at the whole frontline states. We need to look at the fact that no African came to power in Angola. And one of the reasons why a faker, a sellout, a stooge of the FBI like Zimbe can get so much play is that he's disguised as a nationalist. He looks like the people. He walks among the people. They see him. They touch him. But those assimilators who took over power are mostly half Portuguese, wear Portuguese clothes, belong to the Catholic Church, and most of them got Portuguese wives. They don't relate to the people. So the people never came to power in Angola. That's a beautiful country, a big country, and a rich country. We got to stop glorifying these fakers who come to power and sell us a bill of goods. Whites bought up all the real estate, got a hold of all the land in Namibia. Now you're free. Free how? The people of Namibia should go back and understand the spirit of old King Mandume in the Herero War 1904. When he challenged the Germans drove 60,000 women out into the desert to cohabit or die because they wanted to create a bastard race. And they did not know the Herero woman never cohabits outside of her tribe, not even with another African. And she sworn by custom to bring virginity to her wedding bed. Now you think all Africans are promiscuous, you better think again. Now you want to find an African who experiment before the marriage, you go up, look further among the Mende speaking people. Then with the approval of mother and father, you can stay together and have 2 or 3 children before the wedding. You have many customs and many cultures in Africa. They all don't work a lot.
Don't mix pink salt with lemon and 2 other ingredients if you don't want to donate your entire wardrobe in less than a week. Don't believe.
Old King Mandume pulled his people together and said that we are proud people. We walk the earth carrying the sun on our shoulders. If we let this happen to our women, we would have to put down the sun and the world would be in darkness. Look at the symbols now. He unified the Mambas and the Hereros and took them into that battle. He lost 1/3 of the whole Herero nation, but he rescued those women and brought them home. And the Germans never touched them again. Or tried to. Come World War I, and when the German was given 3 years to pack and get out of Namibia, they said, we only need 1. They was out of that. But they rehearsed for Nazism in Namibia. And yet you got Germans right there now help to manage the country. We are so liberal, and our memory bank is so short, bankrupt. People who raped our mother walking around free as a bird among us, grinning in our face. We don't even have enough meanness to get justifiable revenge. There's certain revenge that's owed to every man who's got manhood. I grew up in a community where you didn't even say bad words in front of a man's sister. mean, I put up my dukes even if I'm afraid. Man, you don't talk that way from my sister. We can say anything from your sister, mother, grandma. You don't bat an eye now.
What's the big point here? Because you might be looking at that and saying, all right, what has that to do with Kenya? Now, the emphasis, what's this guy is talking about, basically, in not so many words, is his shedding light on the nature of majority of African countries, Kenya being one of them, where we have stooges, okay? Our economy is still being managed by Westerners, the Brits, the Americans, the Dutch, and so forth. That's why you see the Queen or whatever, the Prince of Finland making his trips to Kenya, and we roll a red carpet. The Charles, not Prince Charles, so now the King Charles comes to America comes to Kenya, and we roll a red carpet, clapping, and you see the Raila Odingas, Uhuru Kenyatta's, the president, dining, grinning, shaking his hand, cheesing it up, taking selfies. This is the kingdom that actually send their soldiers to take your land, brutalize the indigenous people, the Mau Mau, and so forth, okay? These are the guys. And they still own a lot of land, and they still have their soldiers in place somewhere in Laikipia or Lamu, whatever the case is, training your soldiers today, okay? Not really training them, but really protecting their interest. The gold mines, the diamond mines, all that stuff, okay? Where you're told as the Kenyan people, you cannot even have access to some parts of Kenya. What am I driving here? I'm saying that Kenya, like most of African nations, with the exception of a few like the Sahel nations, we are still colonized. Economically, we are colonized. Actually, colonization and slavery was all about economy. That's the bottom line. Okay? Slavery, the colonization, it's all about economy. That's what it basically is. Okay? What they came to these lands, they sent their missionaries to come do their work. Wakuje wa spy on the African indigenous people to see what kind of lands are fertile, what kind of people live in a certain area. Then they brought their soldiers later on to invade, kill, and take their land. Okay? And they started farming, and they started their companies, which ran to this day in Kenya. So, of course, after independence, we know what happened. They saw that it was expensive to have soldiers, British soldiers, in all this land, okay, all across Africa. So what they did was they trained these Africans. In our case in Kenya was Jomo Kenyatta, somebody who speaks English, understands our language, culture, and also does understand the culture of the indigenous people, okay? He pretended to be this Kikuyu, all this, whatever, while he was living his life, living with two white women in London, or whatever the case is. They sent him there to be the first prime minister of Kenya. Then he declared himself president. We know the history. So basically, we had a government in place, but the real economy of the country was not under the control of the indigenous people. The government in place was working on behalf of the West, the British, who are still in control to this day. Okay? Now, we have a wonderful thing called the Constitution, and it's a wonderful document that spells out what kind of power you have, how we are going to govern ourselves, all this human rights stuff, and It's beautiful. No one, it's wonderful. That's what we aspire to. That's what we agreed upon. That's the social contract that we have, that we are supposed to live by and govern ourselves on. But the reality is, the reason why the government had placed these stooges of the British Empire, the Rutos, the Railas, the Uhurus, the Gachaguas, the Martha Karuas, the Wamalwas, the reason why these people cannot implement fully this constitution is because they are not put there to serve the people of Kenya. They are put there to serve the British Crown. Just like the US, if you look at the US, they'll tell you, anybody that now knows history, there's two constitutions in the US. There's the constitution for the Americans, the free Americans, and there's the constitution that actually refers to the America, the corporation. Okay? So there's two. And the British have always used this same trick. Put a bunch of people who are going to work on our behalf. If you want to, learn more about this, there's this British scholar, not British scholar, American scholar. What's his name? He's an economist. I forgot his name. Patrick something. Oh my goodness. Oh shoot. When his name escapes me, when I remember, I'll put it there. I'll put it on the screen and play some bits of it. So what I'm trying to say is this. If you were to look at the Sahel nation, that's why I usually look at the Sahel nation as the perfect example. Ibrahim Traore, what he did was, number one, he had to make sure that Burkina Faso, Mali, and what's the other country? Is it Guinea or whatever? Not Guinea. What's the other one? Mali, Burkina Faso, and the third one, I forgot the name of it. Okay, let's just use Burkina Faso. Okay. What they first did was to make sure that they do have the capacity to protect their borders and get rid of the French-sponsored terrorists of the north. Okay? Because those terrorists were being used to drive the indigenous folks from the mines where the French were mining the uranium in Mali. So the first thing that Ibrahim Traore recognized was, we have to defend ourselves, our borders. And that's what he did, by the help of the Russians. So once he defended his borders, because the fight is to liberate yourself economically, the West always wants you to be dependent. That's why yesterday when I was on my live, I was saying it's very silly for Gachagua to go to the US saying that he's going to present the evidence to the US government of Ruto's atrocities. Yes, it sounds good. He's exposing Ruto, that Ruto is doing all these criminal activities, whatever. But why are you going to another country for a problem that should be taken care of your own country? Don't you have the capability of taking care of this problem yourselves? Okay? You're going to cry on Trump's lap for a mess up of your own individual country. Don't you have a constitution in your own country? I mean, do you see how defeatist that is? And you expect this very guy to become the next president? I mean, you see the silliness of this. And there's this young lady who was asking, the one that was questioning Gachagua in one of those tours when he was in the US. That lady also, I think he has his own organization or part of an organization. And they were saying they were going to one of the senator's office to complain about the military assistance that Kenya gets from the US. Okay? Wanaenda ku complain. And I'm like, it's as if you're going to your colonial master trying to ask them to stop being lording over you, basically. It basically shows that you lack the understanding of how your problem, or understanding of the kind of problem you're facing. The problem is just not the administration, Ruto administration. Understand it. The fight to liberate Africa is not a fight of individuals. It's an economic fight for independence, economic freedom. Slavery was an economic fight, yes, but we were physically being enslaved, so we had to break out that. Colonization was where your movement was being limited. Physically, you're being limited as to where you can go, when you can work, sort of like feudalism. Okay? Of course, capitalism is another form of it. Some people can argue otherwise. But capitalism is, they're creating a system where you are forced to work 40 hours a week in order to actually be able to pay your bills and survive, it's a form of it. And guess who's making all these policies where you have to work 40 hours a week and determining the wages that they should pay you? It's the same corporations. Where does this corporation start? Where did the word corporation start? Go back. It's through the throne of England. They had to give permission for somebody, anyone, to start a corporation. And these corporations were to explore. They would go as far as India to basically enslave the people of India to work for these corporations. But the Queen had to give an okay, the King of England. And the taxes that these corporations make, they had to pay back to the throne of England, the Kingdom of England. Go look at the history of it. And it has never changed. So on a smaller scale, they're doing it within a country. On a bigger scale, they're doing it globally. Now, let me not go further. I just want to bring back the attention to Kenya. And that's why I'm comparing it with Burkina Faso. I hate the example of Singapore because Kenya and Singapore are different. They face different challenges if you look at it. Like I say, of course, Singapore has its own minerals and all that, natural resources, whatever the case is. But in Africa, the Brits, the Dutch, and the French and the Portuguese have deeper ties, depended heavily on the continent of Africa for their raw materials. And as have you seen in Mali or Burkina Faso, as you've seen in Burkina Faso, they've tried everything to assassinate the Burkinabe president, Ibrahim Traore. Why? Because this guy, when he came to power, the first thing he did, he tore off all those policies by IMF and all these Western inspired economic systems, theories, and said, no, we shall do what's best for the indigenous Burkinabes, not what the IMF, World Bank, and these corporations tell us to do, like the Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates just came, was he saying in Kenya, he wants an 8-year contraceptive for the Kenyan people? And you're not outraged, and the president is wanted to give him a free visa to come in whenever he feels like, and you're not standing up for this? You see what I'm saying? So the reason why I am mentioning Burkina Faso is because what they're doing is they identified. Ibrahim Traore saw the kind of politics that was in Mali, that was in Burkina Faso. It was all drama designed to keep the system, the corrupt system going. Where poverty inaendelea, but munakuwa distracted by hii nonsensical drama after drama ya kila siku kama hii unaona wakina Gachagua na Raila na Ruto na Uhuru na Karua. Every day they wake up, they come up with something new. Huyu ana complain about huyu, anaimuita huyu, to just keep you there. But real economic freedom is not in place. And in order for you to achieve that economic freedom, you have to first also be have the capacity to defend yourself, because if you start prospering, any country that, I mean, just look at Tanzania as a good example. Magufuli, Pombe Magufuli, was revolutionizing Tanzania. And when he defied the West and said his country is not going to take those needles during the COVID, they took him out. And now Suluhu came in and is following suit. He's trying to do what's best for the Tanzanians. And guess what? All of a sudden, they're telling you that Tundu Lissu is being mistreated. Suluhu is the worst president ever. Why? Any leader in Africa who defies the West is often demonized and eventually unalived when they try to liberate their people from these economic shackles that the IMF and World Bank and the corporations that are behind them, the West, are putting in place. So that's where it starts. I mentioned this because when I saw that young lady goes to the Senate to complain to the American senator about what's happening in Kenya, it shows the lack of understanding of what kind of problem you're facing in Kenya. If you hear Gachagua say he's going to aid or assist in the investigations against Ruto to offer evidence to the Trump administration to show that the Ruto is doing business with Al-Shabaab, it clearly shows you that there's lack of understanding of who the enemy is, who is keeping you in this economic oppression. Africa is not developing because of these Western corporations, these Western governments that are actually run by these corporations. You understand what I'm saying? So while we spend a lot of time tukipigana na mambo ya Ruto, Raila, 1-term, 3-term, cousins na hizi ujinga zingine, the real problem is, and that's why I explained yesterday how this system is multi-layered, is fortified. If you try to come against it, number one, they have the Boniface Mwangis and Martha Karua and that Khalid, I don't know, Muhammad, whatever his name is, who are pretending to be activists, but really they're taking George Soros' money to organize protest against you once they demonize you, like they're doing that with Suluhu. Why are they not protesting against Ruto? Si Ruto ndio ninio. So they're using them. That's one layer of how they're using Tuninio to kill any dissent or protest or potential revolution from happening in Kenya. That's one point, using the activists, social activists, these useful idiots like Boniface Mwangi and Martha Karua. The second way that they're using this is through the political system in place. And I mentioned that yesterday. These political parties, ukiona wakina Raila wanakuja US, like DCP head of Gachagua wanakuja US, Uhuru anaenda UK. The Kenyatta family has deep relationship with the British throne. Don't you ask yourself why ile funeral ilifanyika Germany? Uhuru Kenyatta was the only black president, black leader who was on that funeral. What's the relationship with them? You do the math. The second layer is the political class, how you conduct your politics. Hawa wanasiasa wote. And it's so interesting how we discuss it. I mean, if you didn't realize that these political parties, which are nothing but individual briefcase money laundering machinery, business by these individuals who we call tribal chieftains, they do their vetting, before they give that direct nomination. Ile tikiti ya kuvai for a certain seat. Unasikia zile mastori huko Nyanza, how elections are being rigged, and the opposition, yule mtu ambao watu wanataka, they always threaten them. Mpaka familia yao inakuwa threatened with violence. Na watu wanakufa because they want to make sure that the person they choose, they want to be the Ninio, Senator Appo, is well vetted and will do what the party leader says. So by the time wafike hapo National Assembly, they are confident that anything the party leader or the owner of this party, whether it's ODM or TNA or UDA, anything that the leader says they want it passed through the National Assembly, it will be passed. Wakisema Gachagua atolewe, Gachagua anatolewe, even regardless of what the law says and the Constitution says. Because they want to make sure that the people who go to the National Assembly, who by the Constitution are supposed to be representing us, they're actually representing the interest of these party leaders. These party leaders who are being sponsored and report to these Western corporations through these ambassadors, like the British High Commissioner in Nairobi and the American ambassador to Kenya in Nairobi. Why do you see the two of them went to Ishaweri to visit an ex-Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta, in his house? Alafu the following week, Ruto went and visited Kenyatta in Ishaweri. They take their orders from these people. Unasikia? That's why when they come up with this conclave or NADCO or BBI or whatever the case is, this is something that has came up from Buckingham Palace through the ambassador, from the ambassador to the NINIO, to the president of Kenya, and from the president of Kenya to these coalition leaders who own these political parties. And from there, these MPs and senators passes the law that they have received originally from what? Their Western puppet masters. So when you sit there, you are hoping to change the system and you're going to Washington, D.C., try to talk to a senator to make a change in your country, and the very people who actually are oppressing you are those who you're going to report to. Are you actually making the right move? Do you have a clear understanding of what you're doing? Obviously, you don't. Obviously, you don't. Here's the young lady. Alikuwa anaenda senator. This is what I was talking about. Tuangalie. Anaenda senate huko Ninio. Kureport sijui nini. Let me just play it for you so you can understand what I'm saying. Ndio hii. If I can only get this to Ninio. Tuipatie dakika kidogo. Ndio imekataa katakata leo. All right, let's give it a second. So zile bado ina come up. Hold on, guys. Haya, ngojeni kidogo. I want to show you the young lady. Poor her. She thinks I'm pretty sure she has a good heart and anajaribu kuleta change or whatever the case is. But like I say, she has she doesn't quite grasp the Ninio, how things work. That's why she's making this move. If she did, angeelewa kuwa going to sijui nini huko Washington DC is not actually going to help her. It's not going actually to help her. But anyway, here it is. And she's wacha nianze na hii ninio. This was here I agree with her when she was talking about the dialogue. Hapa niko nakubali. Hebu tucheze nini yake ya dialogue hapa. Hold on for a minute. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first one. After she questioned Gachagua.
How many times in this country have there been? How do you have dialogue with a regime that is killing you? With a regime that tries to silence dissent every time they feel threatened by it? How many times in this country have there been dialogues? Last year, when the finance bill came out and there was protest, there was a list that was presented by young people. How many of those things in the list was done? We've seen dialogues taking place, but then a certain group of people takes advantage of those dialogues for their own benefit. So I don't see the point. I just see the only way that we can make changes is if we vote and if we, when we say fagia wote, right, we don't necessarily just mean the president must go. We mean the systems, we mean the members of parliament, we mean the governors, we mean all these people who are rogue, all these people who stand on national TV and say shoot to kill, all these people who stand on national TV and say, if it was me, I would have butchered 5,000 Gen Zs, right? That is what we mean. So how do we do it? Ivy can run for a position if she wants to be a member of parliament. Mugambi can say, you know what, I can run for an MCA. That's the only way we do it. A dialogue or intergenerational dialogue or whatever is being mentioned, to me, I don't feel it will suffice. I just think it is a trick, and a trick that has been in the book for so long.
I agree with that as far as, taking out everyone, but like I said, the part that I don't agree with that is that the only way is to vote people for us to run for Senate and MP. You're not going to win this in that MP seat or whatever the case. Like I explained to you that the system is designed in such a way that you have to go through these political parties, okay? Ukisimama hapo as independent, you're not going to stand a chance. Besides, the very body that's supposed to count the votes to determine who wins these elections, regardless of how popular you are, you're not going to win against them because they have a system in place. So you're not going to overhaul the system using the very method they use to prop up their minions. You're not going to beat them in their own game. That's basically what I'm saying. So that's where I disagree with her. But she makes a valid point by saying that, kutoa watu is not just kutoa nani, kutoa Ruto only. It has to be every one of these corrupt individuals ambao wanajifanya hapa ati hao ndio wanasimama na sisi kumbe ni tu nini. Now here it is, kuna nini, I think one of the podcasters was asking about the experience when she had with Rigathi Gachagua when she was asking Rigathi Gachagua hizo swali. And Rigathi akaanza kutetemeka, akaanza
alafu nikaenda na nikauliza Matiang'i.
Ya Matiang'i ulishia?
Nilishia na nilimcall out. Walikuwa hata wamekataa tuulize maswali hadi tukaleta noma all of us, alafu nikaenda na nikauliza Matiang'i swali hata hakujibu. Nilimuuliza if he was president atajail Ruto. Anipea tu generic answers hapo.
Na hukumuuliza juu ya extrajudicial killings during his tenure as a CS for Interior?
I wanted to, but walikuwa hata hiyo mic ndo hata nipate nilileta noma sana. All of us, tulileta noma hadi wakakubali tu niende niulize hiyo swali moja.
Which of course for this old school politicians, they can't bring up that because he also has the icona zile demons inaitwa nini, the Ruaraka land. So when it comes to corruption, I think it's very tricky for him to say that he'd jailed Ruto. Understand? And So yeah, so here Gachagua will happen the exact same place, ama?
Hiyo ilikuwa Marriott, I believe hii ilikuwa Hilton.
Na
Yeah.
normally inakuwagaji, because I heard like the Gachagua one people are being charged. Ama that's
No,
a lie.
wako wanachajiwa, walikuwa initially wameka QR code hapo. I think ilikuwa tu mwenye anataka kusponsor ama kusaidia ku-add pesa hapo wanaweza, but I think venye ilikuwa inakaa nikawa wana charge, but it was a public event.
Okay. And then you go there. When you went there, did you have a question in mind? Like, I'm going to ask this, this is spur of the moment thing that happened?
No, so that was a spur of the moment, but I had a question that I was waiting for the Q&A session to ask him about.
Yes.
Kuna barabara huko Ocha inaitwa Karandi. Nilikuwa nataka kumuuliza about hiyo barabara juu allegedly nilikuwa nasikiza. So unajua huyu Morara hizi kazi amekuwa akifanya za Vampire Diaries.
Yes.
So,
All right. Okay. She's heading to the right direction. I mean, kudos to her for, like I said, she's trying her best. I think she's honestly doing what she thinks is right, and I think she's doing right. It's just maybe she doesn't have the full understanding of how the West plays a huge role in having these minions like the Gachaguas to Ninio. But as you can see, she's exposing the fact that when you go to these Ninio, Wakina Gachagua, they are protected now. They are making sure that there's no question and answer moment where unaweza kuuliza tu swali hivyo. They try to vet and see, hey, hizi maswali namna gani. That's why you see the last meeting where Gachagua was in Kansas, he had a bunch of questions he was holding. There was no people queuing up asking questions. So, speaking of Maraga, Matiang'i. Maraga was maskini. This guy should have just retired. Hii mambo ya kujiweka kwa mambo ya siasa, I think it's too much. Well, I guess he was booed off stage or whatever the case is somewhere in Kisii. Let's see how it is.
Poteza mama ambayo ni dad. When I decided to run for president 2027, yeye ni mmoja wa wale ambao nilisungumuza na wao, nikaomba ushauri wao, na aliniambia kwa sababu alikuwa mtu ya human rights na anajua hiyo ndio mimi nafuatilia, angeniunga mkono mpaka mwisho. Kwa hivyo nimempoteza mama ambayo ni dada yangu, nimempoteza maefota, na nimepoteza mtu ambao angesimama pamoja nanyi. Nataka kuambia kitu moja. Nataka kuambia kitu moja. Mimi nimesimama, nitaenda mpaka mbele. Ile vile serikali iko, vile serikali imeendelea, ile wizi ambao inaendelea, ile kutatii sheria ambao unaendelea, nitafuata mpaka mwisho, na mimi nitasimamia haki. Tuwe pamoja nanyi, tuendelee na kazi iendelee. Mungu awabariki sana.
Bas. Bamindu. Kero muntu nabwato busibore. Irangora. Naende. Nabototo matebiasa bere Matiang'i aire chikura nkiyo ko bari abantaba. What is wrong with you? Ko ire sara onyore nga Matiang'i wirire bono moko mugogera na maite ko ire sara. Bamindu wake. Governor.
Okay, so obviously they did not like what they are Matiang'i fans. Matiang'i is more famous than Maraga apparently. So that's about it. But anyway, in not so many words, as it's been 1 hour here, what I really want to emphasize here is before we get embroiled into this political drama. The political drama is the daily headlines by these very same individuals that are propped up, putting our faces through the mainstream media, Githeri media. It's always drama after drama, this after that. It is designed to programming you into believing that these are the only options. That's why, as we had the discussion yesterday, if you mention a different name outside of these political parties, someone will tell you, who is he? What has he done? What kind of money does he have? Doesn't seem like a viable option because the system has been deeply ingrained in your mind, programmed through this Githeri media. We watch this program, social media. These are the people that you've seen all through the years you've been in Kenya when it comes to politics, okay? And you view them as your leaders. So anyone outside of them seems like an impossibility. You won't even consider. You understand? And not only that, they've won that psychological battle against you. They have these activists that tells you that you cannot do it by yourself. That's why they were telling you, Boniface Mwangi and Martha Karua and the rest of them, Hanefas, were telling you, do not go to the State House and invade that place because it will get ugly. Okay? So they have it. They have the system watertight. Ambayo wame make sure that on all level of society, it is only a very thin way of going through to win a seat or to have a real voice that represents the people, and absolutely no space for a real revolutionary change. So the only way is to take back power and have a revolution. You've heard, a revolution does not have to be bloody. It can be a peaceful one. We can have a peaceful transition of power from these representatives who will be fired by the people and taken back to the people peacefully so that we can revamp, reset the system and elect new leaders, new system of governance that actually is enforceable by law. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that if this was to happen, and the leaders that we shall appoint in the future, if they start implementing policies that are pro-people, that is going to elevate the people in a new social economic stature, the real oppressors who have been keeping us oppressed will not be happy, and they shall do everything to get rid of such leaders. That's why Ibrahim Traore has been escaping violence, assassinations nearly every other day. Okay? So we have to be cognizant of that fact. So we have to have the capacity, whoever we choose to lead us after we take off this rubbish, we have to make sure that they are well protected. The sovereign people have to have a voice. This system have to be broken. That's the same message I had yesterday. That's the same message I have today. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, and comrades, it's been 1 hour. I leave it here. I might be back later on today. Join me then. So in order to join me in that, you have to put the notification bell on, share, like, comment, subscribe, and do all the good stuff. My name is Kenya Revolutionary. I'll see you guys later. Peace and blessings. I'm out.